lost my horse and my last case of beer. And this old world, you can't push away the fear. They want to use my little girl to find themselves a cure over my dead body.
So at the end of The Last of Us, the game, one of the primary points of discussion was whether or not Joel did the right thing when he saved Ellie from the Fireflies. And that has been brought up again when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, when the first HBO season dropped, and now again when we come to the consequence of his actions, which is Abby, spoilers for all of this, Abby tracking him down and killing him out of revenge for killing her father. And this question has been, hotly debated, partly because with any ethical dilemma, there is no clear-cut right or wrong answer, and so people naturally come to different conclusions. And interestingly enough, I think it's broken down along the lines that people have seen. If you are a parent, you generally say that Joel did the right thing because you would do that too. And if you're not a parent, a lot of people who aren't parents say that it was wrong of him because they could have found a cure that would save the world. And this comes down to that question of, the greater good. And personally, my own philosophical take is that when people talk about the greater good, it's generally a terrifying and horrible prelude to something very bad. The greater good might sound good. It helps the most people, but it's led to all sorts of monstrous policies. For instance, China's one-child policy. This was done for the greater good, right? To stem population growth. But it's led to all sorts of horrific things happening in China over the years. And I won't get into all of that. But for me, it's not simply about, as a parent, would I do this? Obviously, I would. If my daughter was to be killed, first of all, people say, well, she didn't even give consent. And yes, that's part of it. But I don't think that a 14-year-old should be able to give consent to give her life, even if it is for the cure, which, by the way, they weren't at all sure they could actually get the cure. This is a doctor and some rebels in Salt Lake who may or may not have been able to actually come up with a vaccine for the cordyceps plague using Ellie. That could have failed, and in that process, they could have lost their one immune subject that we know of, dooming the world even further. So, in just practical terms, the Fireflies were full of shit. There was no guarantee, but even if there was a guarantee, I think Joel did the only moral thing that he could have done, which is to save his daughter. I think it's just absolutely preposterous and somewhat evil to suggest that a father should not just let his daughter die, but do nothing to prevent someone from killing her. Once you do that, you lose all your humanity anyways. And what is worth saving at that point? If you're murdering innocents in order to save the world, well, is it really worth saving anymore? And interestingly, well, first of all, I think that the second game called this into question and made us, really the way that they portrayed Joel in that game and Ellie's reaction to him and the vengeance that Abby takes and the whole setup really made me feel like they were issuing some condemnation of Joel's actions. And I feel like some of that has been walked back in the show a little bit, maybe, but that always rubbed me the wrong way because I much preferred the ending of season 1 or of the first game where you're left with sort of an open-ended, did he do the right thing? What would we do in his shoes? Was it all right for him to lie to her, to just further to protect her, but also to protect his relationship with her? So there's a lot there. And that's one of the brilliant and beautiful things about the first Last of Us game is just how it ended on such a moral quandary and a bittersweet ending where the good guys survive, but at a great cost and with a big lie. But interestingly enough, and one of you fine folks pointed me to this in IGN. There's an interview with the cast and the creators of The Last of Us, and they talk about this issue. And Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, who are the showrunners. Druckmann, of course, is the game director for both The Last of Us games and the creator of these stories. For the first time that I'm aware, Druckmann says, "I believe Joel was right. If I were in Joel's position, I hope I would be able to do what he did to save my daughter." That's pretty interesting to me, because I really got the impression from the second game that really Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann in particular were framing this in a way that condemned Joel's actions, and while still leaving a lot of it up to interpretation, of course. And then Mazin says, "That's so interesting because I think that if I were in Joel's position, I probably would have done what he did." So they both agree. But he says, "But I'd like to think that I wouldn't," that's odd to me. You'd like to think that he wouldn't. That's the interesting push and pull of the morality of it. And that's why the ending of the first game is so provocative and so wonderful. It just doesn't let you off the hook as a player. It's interesting that he'd like to think he wouldn't save his daughter. I guess that's him saying that he would rather not be selfish, because in a way, that's a lot of people interpret Joel's actions as selfish. Saving Ellie for his own selfish reasons. And I guess there is something to be said for love being selfish. I guess we are a little selfish. We protect our loved ones. Sometimes we prioritize their needs over others, certainly over the greater good. But I guess I never felt that. Like, if I were in Joel's position, I would just hope that I could be as badass that I could fight through that many people with that clarity of purpose and that skill. Of course, I do not have. I would die. I'm not a good enough shot. But maybe if I was in the apocalypse and I'd been through all the things Joel had been through, maybe I would be good enough to do that. I don't know. The cast also adds their sort of vague and non-committal answers. It's complicated. Merced, what's her face? The chick who plays Dina. It's complicated. And she says the season explores that. Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy, says, "I'm biased, I'm his brother, and I understand, and you can't see the scope of the whole world. You can only see your world, and Ellie is his world. And so, I can't personally fault him as Tommy, and maybe not even as Gabe, so I don't know." Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, it's really hard to suggest that people should sacrifice the thing that matters most to them, or an innocent child for that matter, whether that, in order to save this abstract whole world, right? Let's see. Young Mazzino, who plays Jesse, says, "I feel like he was on autopilot. I think he was kind of just, he blacked out and it was just all hazy until he came to." I would think that's probably true. To some degree, though obviously he blacked out and went on autopilot for a very obvious purpose. And then Craig Mazin says, "People get to the end of The Last of Us and there is that question, what would you do? What should you do if faced with the opportunity to save the world? If you sacrifice your child?" That goes back to Abraham and Isaac. That's interesting. It's so profound, the notion of sacrifice to save the world. It's a difference between, okay, if I had to kill a random person to save who knows how many lives in the abstract, you would say, well, yeah, that makes sense, of course, Druckmann adds. But now remove it from being a random person and it's your kid. Now the answer is very different. And then the interviewer brings up the trolley problem, which is like, would you if there's a trolley running along tracks and you have to make a choice between it going to this track and killing one person and saving this group of people, versus it going and killing this group of people to save this one. That's the ethical dilemma posed by the trolley problem. Obviously you choose the one because more lives are saved. But if it's someone if it's someone you love and care about, that changes matters. Anyways, this is sort of the first half of what I wanted to talk about in this video, because I think it's just something that's really important to discuss. It's a great subject of conversation around this story, and it's probably the most important one until, of course, we get to this question of revenge and how you lose your humanity through the pursuit of revenge, which is what the second game addresses. And I think that's less interesting to me because it's been explored in so many other great works of art. And The Last of Us, I think, kind of uniquely explored this idea of sacrifice and versus, the individual versus the greater good. But what I wanted to talk about in the second half of this video is alternatives to The Last of Us Part 2, because, they could have told other stories. And so I came up with a few just for fun. And some of these are, ideas that people have talked about before. For instance, The Last of Us Part 2 could have been a prequel that tells the story of Joel and Tommy prior to Ellie showing up on the picture. Because there's a whole bunch of intervening years between when the outbreak first occurs and Joel loses his daughter and when he meets up with Ellie. He's a very different man at that point. And so is Tommy, and there's a whole story of all the bad shit that they got into that could have been explored. Now, the one downside to this game would have been that you wouldn't be able to play Ellie or have her in the story. That would have been a bummer. But then again, the game we got, you didn't really get to have Joel, at least for most of it. So, and Ellie still would have been alive, and so it would have been a little bit less of a hit. Another idea: get away from Joel and Abby altogether and tell the story of Abby and her father sort of in a concurrent with the first game's storyline, or maybe a little earlier, but prior to her father getting killed. Obviously, you could tell the story of how they came to be part of the Fireflies and what they were up to, and we could have learned and fallen in love with these characters over the course of an entire game, only realizing at the very end that this is the doctor that Joel kills, which would have added a really interesting wrinkle to that story and maybe set up the third game where all this revenge stuff happens. That could have been interesting. Another thought that I had for the second game, it's the same basic setup. Abby comes and she finds Joel, but what happens is different, right? There's some sort of conflict. She's going to kill Joel. He saves her, and in this, I don't know, maybe there's a big fight with cordyceps, and he saves her even though he knows she's going to kill him, and then she doesn't actually kill him, but he falls off a cliff or something. And this is really broad stroke stuff, so bear with me. He falls off a cliff. Ellie sees what happens. She blames Abby, and then for the first third of the game, you're playing as Ellie, trying to find Abby to get revenge on her. On the second third of the game, you play as Abby, and you learn her side of things. And then in the third part of the game, you play as Joel, who didn't actually die. He fell off this cliff. He was washed down a river, whatever. He wakes up. He returns to find that Ellie's already gone. And then in the third part of the game, you're tracking down Ellie, trying to stop her from this crazy revenge quest. And everything culminates at the end when Joel shows up and Ellie's let Abby go, blah, blah, blah. Similar sort of setup. You explore revenge, you do all that, but you don't kill off Joel. And maybe that's just me, doing the thing where you just don't want a character to die and you can't let go. But I think it would have been an interesting twist on the whole part 2 that we got, having the same motivations, but not actually killing off Joel and having him stick around, because, that would be a more uplifting ending than the one we got. And, a lot of people will say, well, that's cheesy or whatever, but I don't care. Sometimes I want uplifting endings because this game is just so freaking dark. Fourth idea would be a totally new story that has nothing to do with Joel and Ellie or Abby or any of those characters, but you make this an anthology series where you show different stories across the apocalypse with different characters that aren't connected in any way or only tangentially connected. And that, I think, could have made for an interesting series in general, or each new Last of Us game is a disconnected story with a totally new cast and a totally new location that explores different aspects of the apocalypse and different themes and different relationships and leaves sort of morally gray conclusions that we have to grapple with, but don't, fuck with the characters that we already love from the first game. And finally, my last idea: don't make a sequel, because the ending for the first game was perfect. Leave it there. This was my first and initial thought when I heard they were making a sequel. I thought, how? Why? It's the perfect ending. The first game ends on such a beautiful and bittersweet note that why would you make a sequel? it can't make it any better. And I still believe that that's true, that the game that we got afterwards, for all its technical achievements, for all the wonderful acting and music and all the great things they did in that game, I don't think that it actually enriches the story in a way that I think is worthwhile. I think that the first game should have been its own thing. And that's the benefit of my fourth idea, which is to tell a totally new story. You can still leave that initial story alone and just tell a totally new story. So these are all different ways that they could have approached this that would have probably been a little less divisive and controversial. And you know, at least in the second one where you learn about Abby and her dad and you play as them and you get to that ending, then if you want to make a third one where Abby gets revenge, at least you've done the work and built up those characters in such a way that we already care about them. And then I would just say, don't have Abby kill Joel in this horrific manner. I really think that this was one of the big mistakes. It's so shocking. It makes her such a monster because, you know, you may recall, not only did Joel just simply shoot her dad, he not torture him and not kill him slowly, or, you know, he did it to save Ellie, right? And there has to be, I just feel like Abby would have been such a more sympathetic character if she had realized this, if she had reckoned with this and grappled with this, and maybe in her revenge, you know, had felt more conflicted and had gotten it over with quicker, because she wasn't there just to be cruel. She was there to try to find closure for herself. So, what do you think about all this? I'm always curious to hear your thoughts, and please do let me know down in the comments. And like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all your great feedback on my last couple videos. I've had a couple people say they really enjoy my rambling style of reviewing things. And that makes me feel good, because sometimes I think maybe I should do more edits, or maybe I should write a script, or but that's just not my style. And so when I get that feedback, I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Peace.
Last case of beer, and this old world you can't push away the fear. They want to use my little girl to find themselves a cure over my dead body. Now it's up to me and my trusty 45 to do what needs doing to keep that girl alive. Some see monsters when they look into the night. I see fireflies. It's the end of the world, yeah, it's all falling down. There's snow on the mountain is piling up now. Ellie's on the front porch playing her guitar, and I'm just looking at the stars. Yeah, I'm just looking at the stars. Now Abby's standing here with vengeance on her mind. Some of these scars you can never leave behind. Ellie's coming yonder, but I reckon she's too late. Over my dead body, it's the end of the world, yeah, it's all falling down. And the snow on the mountain is piling up now. Ellie's on the front porch playing future days for me, and I'm just dreaming of the sea. I'm just dreaming of the sea.